This latest chapter of One Punch Man was absolutely, positively insane. We seriously went from 0 to 100 with this one, as the fight between Saitama and Garou would continue to epic proportions. This is easily one of the most exciting times to be a fan of One Punch Man, so for even more, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. The cover of this chapter would see a serious-looking Saitama facing down against a ready Garou, along with the text, "Facing off, the most powerful and the most evil." Now, based on all that he has done up to this point, I can certainly co-sign the notion of Saitama being the strongest. However, next to the concept of Garou being the most evil, I have to wonder how factual this statement stands to be overall. Garou, with the exception of his exceptionally brutal introduction to the series, has yet to do anything I would truly consider to be evil, and has actually demonstrated far more good, so yeah, very interesting text here indeed. Now, to kick things off, we would have the evacuated heroes and civilians together, continuing the scene presented to us at the end of the previous chapter. It would be expressed by Moomin Rider that with the fissures having concluded, it was now safe for them to begin evacuating from the area by boat, which were being prepared in the background. However, Sakingar would have his reservations against doing so, as despite things seemingly having settled for the time being, without frequently new monsters have entered the fray, it's hard to say whether things were truly stable and safe or not. Yet at the very least, he did believe that they should begin prepping the wounded for transport by way of the boats. Now, this talk of monsters would get Lightning Max thinking. It looked to him like the two massive monsters that recently arose had been suddenly torn apart, prompting him to wonder how such a thing came about. A major feat of strength that with conviction, Tadeo will point towards Garou, who he would refer to as Uncle. Then going on to elaborate that Uncle must have taken them down since he is an incredible hero who protected him. An expression that seemed to only add to the confusion at hand. Moomin Rider from there would ask if the person in question was a middle-aged man wearing a tank top, of course referring to Tank Top Master, which Tadeo would dismiss. Moomin Rider very clearly not having a proper gauge for strength. However, to interrupt these discussions would be an absurdly staggering tremor of the ground. Something very bizarre was clearly occurring yet again. All the heroes were not only concerned, but frightened, as after all, they were incredibly exhausted. Not to mention there weren't any S-Class heroes presently in their midst. Now, it was unclear if all this commotion was on account of someone fighting or a continuation of the previous seismic activity. There were just far too many unknowns here in regards to both friends and foes alike, with no means of confirmation. As we would then receive some incredibly major impacts being had some distance away. Certainly felt, yet very much out of sight. And this was Garou versus Saitama. Garou, who is in the midst of sending a wild flurry of aggressive blows towards his opponent, who in return evaded each and every one of said moves with a rather indifferent and nonchalant expression on his face as they duked it out way up high in the upper atmosphere. Meanwhile, the one with the upper hand was exceedingly clear, but then again, this was also certainly only just the beginning. We would then receive what is honestly a very impressive feat for Garou, and that is the dodging of Saitama's fist, which instead went over his head. And after ducking beneath the attack, Garou whirled his leg around while using the fist of Saitama as leverage for his own hand, which he followed up by dramatically kicking Saitama back down to earth as a great deal of water and rocky debris would rush upwards in response. And very much like in his previous fight against Flashy Flash and Platinum S, Garou would use the debris as footstools, allowing him to rush towards his prey with exceptional expediency, leaving a visual trail behind himself. All the while, Saitama was simply in the midst of patting the dust off his costume. As he drew closer, Garou would reel back an arm and get the attention of Saitama. And here, Garou would make use of the so-called perfected fist he was ever so proud of and chop it directly onto the cranium of the bald hero, with a viciousness and ferocity that dwarfed even that which he possessed against Sage Centipede only moments prior. And the fallout from this direct attack onto Saitama's form, good lord, was devastating. Everything around them would begin to collapse, and only got worse as the mere collision of these two entities proved too volatile for their environment. Yet, unlike the results he had seen against Sage Centipede, Garou here would begin to grit his teeth as he struggled to find any give against the shiny surface of Saitama's head. It was to the point where the otherwise perfect form of Garou's chop began to wane and buckle from the pressure. This exceedingly offensive act against his opponent suddenly became a moment of defense for Garou. Saitama is so strong that to even attack him at all is inherently dangerous. And Garou would soon learn this lesson the hard way as Saitama lifted his head fully, and as a result, completely shattered the hand of Garou. He broke apart as if like a humanoid construct of stone. And in seeing this, Saitama would wonder about Garou here, questioning what was wrong with him and why he was picking a fight so suddenly, which Garou would not respond to as his severed hand would immediately begin to regenerate, clearly displaying the now especially monstrous capabilities he presently possesses. But best believe, things only get that much crazier in that realm as we continue on with the chapter. Now, despite these transgressions, Saitama was fine with it, as he still had something to say to Garou anyways. And based on the events of the previous chapter, it would seem that this was spurred on by his recognition of Garou's name, since before that, he was ready to be on his way in pursuit of his washed away homely possessions. But Garou, again, would completely ignore Saitama's words here and go in for a punch to the face, which would only serve to annoy Saitama at this point, as he would tell the guy to listen when he's talking, all while hitting Garou and sending him flying. And man, oh man, Saitama had Garou's body jumping across the water like he was skipping stones. Meanwhile, Garou was still trying his best to wrap his head around just how powerful Saitama really is. And listen, this launching of Garou would go really far, as our various A-class heroes would begin to notice his surging torrent of water headed right for them. They would lead to safety just in the nick of time as Garou finally made his final collision. Saitama was simply too strong, and the proof was right there. The startled evacuees would completely freeze at the sight of the single exposed leg of Garou as he laid beneath the rubble. Yet as he arose, completely drenched and aggravated by the current state of the battle, Tadeo in particular was especially enthused to see his savior yet again, as he would go on to call out to him, much to the concern of Lightning Max. Max would again be thrown off by the possibility of a figure bearing such a visage being the boy's uncle, as Sakingar would admit that he had no idea who the man was, but at the very least he had aided in taking down the massive centipede creature earlier. However, despite all this, Garou paid none of these guys any mind. He was overwhelmingly frustrated as his dream was right there within his grasp. Yet just as he was about to realize it, the absolute biggest hurdle he has ever faced in the form of Saitama had appeared. And so he resolved to take the man down for the sake of fulfilling his ultimate goal. Otherwise, he would never be able to become absolute evil. And it is here that Garou would undergo yet another transformation, the most sinister and monstrous looking one of them all, as his size would drastically increase, the spiky protrusions on his back would be risen to all-time highs, and his face favored that of a four-tails chakra cloak Naruto, which I absolutely love. And I mean, the terror invoked by this form would be written all over Tadeo's face, which would very quickly be shared by the likes of our heroes. Lightning Max for a moment would be terrified, yet like a true hero, along with Snek, would rush into action despite this in protection of Tadeo. Now this shift for Garou was an especially interesting one, as unlike all those to come before, was one he was actually conscious of. I mean, his last one kinda just happened without him realizing, as he was raging for quite some time, totally unconscious of his own actions. Yet now, he could recognize his body mutating in response to his rage as he inspected his own form. Yet he wasn't the only one getting a good look of this new form of his, as the various heroes would be quick to get going now after seeing it, dragging Tadeo along with them. However, the kid would be very quick to escape and make his way back. Garou could now feel his strength overflowing, believing that now, with this, he would be able to do all that he needed to. However, his attention would be drawn elsewhere as Tadeo approached him. Garou, in his incredibly monstrous form, would greet the kid and merely acknowledge that the boy was alive, which was especially similar to what Garou had said the first time he had saved Tadeo after facing off against the horde of heroes. And despite shaking in fear on account of Garou's outward appearance, Tadeo was now certain it was him and would refuse to run away like he had previously. And so now, with tears and a big smile on his face, Tadeo believed Garou was in fact a hero all along, which no doubt confused Garou. Here he'd remind the kid of what he had said previously, that he was not a hero. After all, just look at his new form. Garou would mention how he had finally managed to become a true monster before being cut off by Tadeo, who would rebut that Garou was a hero. Garou didn't understand, but Tadeo would point out how he had been saved for the 4th time by him. That now he knew for certain that whenever he was in trouble, Garou would come running to save him. That he was the coolest, greatest hero of them all to him. And so he had come to beg Garou to stop pretending to be a monster. From here, the kid would begin to cry for a whole new reason, as he didn't want Garou to be misunderstood and hated. Garou was at a loss for words here and would hesitate before recalling the hurdle ahead of him, Saitama. He didn't want Tadeo to cry. It certainly bothered him, as internally, he begged for the kid not to make such a face when he was finally on the verge of showing him the moment where the monster wins. Garou sees his younger self in Tadeo, and as such, feels the need to provide the kid with a display he himself had always longed for and never received. But to interrupt this moment would be Saitama. He would confirm that this was Garou he was speaking to, then saying that Garou's behavior is going to make Bang cry, which caught Garou's attention. Saitama would list off Garou's transgressions such as hunting heroes, destroying dojos, and now pretending to be a monster and making children cry, as Tadeo would recognize Saitama to be a hero. Saitama would furthermore be cheeky enough to tell Garou to act like an adult and cut the hissy fits out. But now that he had gotten a better look at Garou's current stature, he'd question if his previous comment bothered the guy, referring to the whole him not looking like a monster thing, as he would at least now compliment what he presumed to be an intricate cosplay, wondering if the guy had put another part on top now. With this, Garou would become far more serious, telling Tadeo to get a good look, as he was going to change the kid's entire outlook on life, showing him just how powerless heroes truly are. On account of his agenda, there would no longer be anyone left to kill or save him. There would only be Garou, the embodiment of absolute evil. Which to me sounds like one final heroic act to end all heroic acts, but whatever. Ultimately, Garou sought to put an end to the world that made both of them cry. But Tadeo would suddenly begin to panic all over again as he realized Garou intended to fight this hero, which certainly wouldn't help his case in being accepted by all the other heroes. But despite this urging, the kid would be told to get out of the way by Garou. But oh man, this is what I'm talking about. Saitama would pull up really close to Garou and question if the guy wanted to hit him, which caught Garou off guard. With a relatively sinister smile, Saitama would tell Garou to go right ahead, then asking if Garou was chicken. Saitama is way too disrespectful, and oh my goodness, Garou's aggression would begin to boil over even further as his exposed eye would change in color as it had for his previous forms, as he would tell Saitama not to make him laugh, as he would punch Saitama in the face with all his might, as an absolutely stunned Tadeo would stand there with his mouth wide open. But soon Garou would join him in disbelief, as there wasn't even a blemish on Saitama's face. His head merely steamed as he hadn't even blinked and would simply move his head forward and continue staring at Garou. Tadeo's mind was shattered by this. It was incomprehensible. Welcome to the club, kid. Saitama would then place his hand on Tadeo's head, patting it and letting him know that he shouldn't worry, as he wouldn't get hurt at all. But now, rightfully feeling pretty disrespected, Garou would attempt to knee Saitama as he did this, but Saitama would simply lift his hand off the kid's head and slap Garou elsewhere, telling him that they'll take this over there, as again, like a ragdoll, Garou was sent flying. Tadeo would cry out in dismay and concern for Garou's safety, but Saitama would double check that the boy wanted Garou to be stopped and not killed, which Tadeo, despite his astonishment, would confirm with the nod of his head. And with this in mind, Saitama would tell the kid to leave it to him, as he casually sauntered over to where he had sent Garou. And with the fact that he won't be going for the kill in mind, this fight will truly test just how long Garou can last despite Saitama's attempt to non-lethally subdue him, which is just so ridiculously exciting. If you're feeling the hype right now, let us know down below. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.